sizes and colors. But familial love is perhaps the most difficult to detect because it can show up in the most unexpected, crazy-ass ways. And sometimes it can be life-threatening. Like the time my brother tried to kill me. Even though the rifle was a BB gun, he still wanted me dead because he loved me. He was 11, I was 4. Dressed in my puffy pink quilted snowsuit, Daniel set me up in our backyard as his target, carefully placing me in a patch of ivy so I'd have a soft place to fall once the deed was done. Because he loved me. Just stand there, he said as he aimed the rifle. Don't move. Because I loved him, I listened to him. Lucky for me, he wasn't such a great shot. He'd hit the trees, the ivy, or the fence. One BB did graze my snowsuit with a small tear, but he never mowed me down. Because he loved me. This wasn't the first time Daniel tried to off me. After being Prince of the Kingdom for 7 years, he wasn't about to let me take over the peerage. My brother's determination to lovingly eliminate me from the planet started much earlier, and I've got home movies to prove it. My father, an avid home movie maker, captured every aspect of our young lives. In one movie, Daniel, age 7, is gleefully shaking me so vigorously in the baby pram. Today he would be doing 4 years in Antelope State Valley Prison's maximum security. But my father, so intent on keeping the pram in frame, kept right on filming because he loved me. Though my familial love looked a lot like attempted murder, I began to see it wasn't just my brother who loved me almost to death. My parents did too, but with them, it was lovingly death by humiliation. Like the time my mother tried to toilet train me at 9 months old. According to the home movie, I was seated on the potty, strapped into some sort of wooden Nazi-like torture contraption. I would have had to have been Houdini to wiggle my way out of all the belts and ball gags that had me strapped. The story goes, I was so traumatized I couldn't poop for a week. And to make matters worse, my father showed this video at dinner party because he was proud of me for being an early adapter. Between my parents' loving humiliations and my brother's loving sadism, life was a constant state of anxiety. I never knew when the next love bomb would drop. Finally, it did. Daniel blew up his chemistry set in the attic, singeing my eyebrows in the process. I was watching, perhaps too closely. So where were my parents during all this? Working. I had working parents at a time when no one had two working parents. My mother had a fancy job in the fashion business in New York City. She was too busy buying up Chanel to attend a bake sale, PTA meeting, or take me to the pediatrician for an unexplained rash. If a friend couldn't play after school because they had a doctor's appointment, I was jealous. Jealous of an appointment where you could get stuck with a needle. I often asked to tag along, to see how this whole parenting thing I had heard so much about really played out. Given Daniel's irresponsible actions, and concerned calls from the school principal about my depression, my parents decided to hire a nanny to supervise us. Enter Kinga, a larger-than-life, fresh off the boat, 55-year-old Polish woman. She wore shabby but professional-looking tiny print flower dresses, mid-calf in length, with those orthopedic-like lift shoes that male hairdressers used to wear. To top that off, she had a huge black mole on her chin, which had a big black hair sticking out of it that you could not help looking at. If you got too close, you could get royally pricked by just that single hair. Basically, she looked like a Russian army drill sergeant in drag. But Kinga's special talent was that she cooked scrumptious Polish delicacies from scratch. Every night, she seduced my parents with steaming bowls of krupnik and golumpkis, translation, barley soup, and cabbage rolls. So my parents felt sated and confident in their new hire. Why my brother thought Kinga wouldn't notice he'd stolen an entire tray of her freshly baked jam kolaches cookies was anyone's guess. Once he made off with the goods, he fled out to the back porch where he'd stuff himself and me with the stash. Hearing Kinga's booming footsteps stomping in our direction, he dumped the batch of cookies in my lap and run. Apoplectic, she cursed me in Polish, threatening to whip me on my bare legs with her wet kitchen towel like she usually did. Because she loved me too. Turns out Kinga was the Cruella de Vil of nannies. Which is not to say she wanted to make a coat out of my skin, but only to say she was downright mean, and you never knew what was going to set her off. For example, she hated our dog Lucky. Admittedly, Lucky had an unpredictable vicious streak, much like Kinga herself. And he would sometimes snap your arm in a clamp hold if you simply reached out to pet him. But if Kinga tripped over the dog while he was sleeping, she'd broom him down the basement steps and leave him there for the day without water. Like I said, Cruella. She also assaulted my friends. If she didn't like how someone was singing to Annette Funicello's "Let's Get Together," she'd yank her ponytail or give her a pinch. When my mother came home from work, I'd race to the door, detailing Kinga's deviant behavior, while my mother listened and sipped her scotch. But she never believed me. Jill, they do things differently in Poland. What had Kinga put in those golumpkis? Whatever it was, my parents were blinded. Until the clothespin incident. One day, our dog Lucky made off with 4 pieces of filet mignon that were thrown on the counter for dinner. Kinga became so enraged he put a clothespin on his ear. He was yelping and running around the front yard like a whirling dervish when my mother drove up for a surprise lunchtime visit. Finally, my mother got to witness the horror firsthand. Needless to say, that was the end of Kinga. I will hold for your appropriate applause. Unfortunately, it wasn't the end of my brother's loving assaults. On a very hot summer day, Daniel pushed me out of our backyard kiddie pool and into the driveway. I looked down and saw an empty glass pickle jar glistening on the blacktop. I picked it up and whacked him over the head and watched him look at me with mouth agape in horror and confusion. Now he would know how much I loved him. That fall, Daniel went off to college and I became a true latchkey kid. Once I got used to the silence of an empty house, I grew to enjoy my solitary existence. With no one telling me what to do, I began to create my own universe. I wrote a volume of erotic short stories about Eric Perlmutter, Sept Hansen, and Joel Hartley, who were the sexiest guys on the baseball team and the reason I went to every game. But they had no idea who I was. I learned how to cook, making up crazy things like sautéed onions on ruffled potato chips, French fried bologna topped with sunny-side-up egg whose yolk I could never keep from breaking. I collected a menagerie of wounded and stray animals, a yellow-bellied sapsucker fallen from a nest, a nervous Dalmatian, a sick squirrel named Chippy who I saved from freezing to death. These were my family in the universe I was creating for myself. I later transferred this gift for the healing into my relationships with men. Not such a great idea. I no longer fault my mother for not being there. She was a great influence. The admiration I felt every night when she walked through the door with news of her workday in New York City is still with me. And though the familial love I experienced in the form of bloodshed and attempted homicide, I prevailed. And I wouldn't be me without having been showered with this crazy kind of love. In some ways, a part of me will always be that latchkey kid who found affection from strays and wounded creatures. But here I am, now standing up and being heard, and learning more about the colors of love every day. Because despite my family's best efforts, I'm not dead yet.